You ready?
Richey!
Water. My water. All right. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be talking about the ancient Greek sophists. This is going to be the first part of our series on the love of wisdom. So let's proceed. Got a few terms that we'll be talking about today, and let's go straight to our journal prompt. But before that, we'll hydrate. If you were given a choice between knowledge and power, which one would you choose and why? Caroline.
I would choose knowledge because if you were in power and you were stupid, then you would just get kicked out of power and then you would be powerless.
Okay, so the thing is, stupidity plus power equals... So it's no use just getting a hold of power because you would lose that, correct? All right, so that's one way to look at it. So you would take knowledge only because you would lose power. Yeah. If you thought you could be stupid and hold power, you'd pick power? Maybe. So power, knowledge, you've kind of chosen power as a greater value. Even though you chose knowledge, you chose power as the greater value, is what I'm hearing.
All right.
Destiny.
Well, I would choose knowledge. Because if you have knowledge, you will know how to be able to manipulate all those things and rise in power, and you can stay in power.
So knowledge leading to power, not through honest means, but through...
Well, it can also be through honest means.
Well, but that's not what you said.
Well, okay, yeah. Okay.
So, I didn't twist her. She said I could go to power by manipulate. We're recording this, okay? So, I did not make this up. It can't be said that, oh, he's putting words in our mouths, he's manipulating us, because that's what was said. That is a graphic representation of what was said. Next. All right, who's next? Come on, Cletus. Justin.
Neither.
Huh? Neither.
I'd rather live normal, maybe, something like that.
You'd rather be ignorant and powerless. I guess at least one of those is bliss, according to the book of Proverbs, right?
Be stupid. No,
Or is it Ecclesiastes? Ignorance is bliss? I think that's in Proverbs, is it not?
I can look it up. Just
Look it up, huh? Ignorance is bliss, so he would rather have bliss. So neither one is a value to me. I don't want to have power or knowledge. Okay, that's one way to look at it, but some of us may be a little more ambitious. Seth.
I would take power.
He would just take power, okay? Seth would just take power. Why? Because Seth says, you know what? If I had power, then I could bring an army.
Tea Party Republicans contemplating a bid to oust without their support, there's no chance of operating this Congress.
So Seth is just going ahead. And saying, I would take power. All right? Now, that's because Seth's thinking, you know what, if I had power, then I would be able to use all of the military forces at my disposal to find teachers who would teach me things. And power could lead to knowledge. Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah.
Seriously, though.
I was thinking I already had knowledge.
Oh, because I'm already so smart, because I know things. Socrates would love to have a conversation with you, Seth. You were exactly Socrates' target market. So that's the thing. Power because I'm already awesome, right?
Yeah.
Next. Come on, this is not 1A. Emily?
Ecclesiastes 1:18.
Okay, Ecclesiastes 1:18. It was Ecclesiastes. Ignorance is bliss. Nice. Emily? Knowledge or power? Caroline already said what? Because you think you would lose power? Okay, so it's just that you would pick knowledge just because you don't think you could wield power without knowledge. So once again, power is your dominant value. Who else? Zoe? Neither? Don't know? Non-committal? Caroline?
I wouldn't say power is the dominant one. It would be if you had knowledge to go with it, but without knowledge, it's pointless.
Right. So without power, so you say that power without knowledge power without knowledge is pointless, right? Okay? Now what about what is knowledge without power? Tell me that. Define that for me, Caroline. It's not pointless. Okay, what is it then? If it's not pointless, what is it? If I had lots of knowledge but I had no power,
It's
then
useful.
useful for what? Because power,
It would
gain
be
power.
useless.
well, you could say that. It's really a value judgment. So the thing is, what is power? We might need to go back and define our terms. Now, we're getting into a Socratic sort of dialogue here because I'm posing questions and we're talking about power, but what I've realized is we might not necessarily even know what power means. Unless we have defined power, then we don't really even know what we're talking about. So what is the idea of power? When we say power, what is it that we mean? Caroline?
Going back before this, what you were saying, having knowledge without power, it's not really pointless, but it actually kind of is because if you don't have power, you don't have a way to share the knowledge that you have.
Megan, define power. No. She is either powerless to define it or she is using her power not to define. One or the other. Justin.
The ability to do something or act in a particular way.
I didn't. No. Phones away, please, unless you have had permission to have it out. We want to generate. Our objective is to generate a common definition of the idea of power. Erica?
Having a certain level of authority.
Okay, so power meaning authority. Now, what do you mean by authority?
I think it can be making, like, the ability to make somebody listen to you or to follow what you say. Control.
Okay, so compulsion, control over what?
Over people.
Over people. Okay, so over people. So we think that power is the ability to dominate. Abby? Be like what? Energy. Okay, so when we think about energy, now typically we think about that in terms of non-human objects, right? But how could we apply that principle to this definition of power when it comes to people, if we're thinking about energy? Okay, but let's compare this to people. When we're applying this in human terms, how could we take this concept of energy? Because we've seen the point of power, that when a lot of people think about power, they think about this stuff, like the ability to dominate other people. But then when we talk about energy, let's think about kinetic energy. What does this have the ability to do? This object? Move. So let's think about that in terms of people. Okay, so when we think about power, we think about strength. Okay, Megan using her power to jump into the conversation and define. Thank you. Now, strength. So we think about somebody with strength. They have power. All right, the person who can pick up a car or something like that, that person has power. Whereas someone who is not as strong might not have as much power. Now, that is, we could talk about this in a physical sense, but what would be another sense where somebody could be described as having power and it not have anything to do with any of this? Okay, so intelligence. Now, the thing is that it was Bacon who said that knowledge is power. Now, we typically interpret this the way that we want to interpret it and say that knowledge is a means by which to have power, a means by which to be dominant, that the person who is smartest is going to be the person who is going to end up the most dominant, right? So we think that. But then we think about other definitions of power. There have been some people who've said this is not what Francis Bacon meant when he said that knowledge is power. That when he said that knowledge is power, actually talking about what is this? Strength, intelligence? Let's think about Anthem. When we read Anthem, would you say that equality / Prometheus was more powerful at the end than at the beginning? Then what is power? What does it mean? We could go and we could say, what does it mean to be powerless? What does it mean to be powerless? Okay, so to have no control over the situation. So not just over other people, but over your own life even perhaps, right? Over your own situation. So power does not necessarily have to be the ability to dominate, but the ability to maybe to use your strength and to your intelligence. What does that mean? The ability to use your things to do what you want? How else could we define power? Freedom, because if we think about it, what you mentioned as powerlessness is to not have any control over anything, even yourself. So you could think of power in terms of freedom as well. So power could be your own freedom to act, which a lot of times we think about power as dominating others, because if we have the ability to dominate someone else or order them around, do we see ourselves as having freedom? Do we say, yeah, because if I can compel other people, then that makes me that much more free. That makes them one more step away from being able to do the same thing to me. If you look at U.S. history, a lot of the biggest advocates of of freedom in early U.S. history, you think about people like Jefferson and Madison. These guys were slaveholders. And there are historians who have argued that because Jefferson and Madison were slaveholders, because they get to see slavery, and they get to see what it looks like for somebody to live a life of compulsion and not have any control, that these people were that much more jealous of their own liberty, because they got to see what happens when somebody does not have liberty. Now, so when we think about that, knowledge without power could very well be kind of pointless. But at a certain point, we have to come up with a value judgment that when we think about knowledge and power, which one is more important to us? Because both are important, correct? But which one is more important? And the other thing is, why? Education. Why? Education. Now, our school motto is Discere est vincere. Anybody ever seen that? Our school crest? And it's got these words here. It's got a couple of flags. It says Discere, which ere is the infinitive in Latin. So that means to. It would have to in front of it. So est, which means is. Discere, what is this? What is this root? Disc. We're thinking like a disc, okay. Discover comes from the same root as to know. So discere, to learn, okay, to learn or to discover. So to learn is vincere. Now what do we see here? There is a word, invincible. What? Well, you're thinking vitae, life. Okay, so but that's close. Now, to witty, wiki. I came, I saw, I conquered. All right, so it's the same kind of form as this. Now, to learn is to conquer. This is kind of a variant of knowledge is power, right? That it's really, they're not mutually exclusive. But when we think about why we're here, knowledge, power. Carson, what's your career cluster? You don't know? Kudos to you. Wait, y'all. How many of you know your career cluster? Anybody? Let's see. Wiley, what's your career cluster? Medicine. Sam? STEM. Okay. Science, technology, whatever that other stuff is. Yes?
Is there one like called speaking or something like that?
Speaking. You want to be a sophist when you grow up?
Pastor.
A youth pastor? Okay. So that could be something, perhaps communications or something like that. Health sciences. Now, a lot of you don't know your career cluster. Rain, you don't know yours right now? Now, Rain says, you know what? I don't know my career cluster because that's not why I'm at school. I go to school to learn. Okay, that's what he's thinking. Now, thing is, Megan, you know yours? What is yours? Communications? Okay. So, yes, there is something. That would probably be communications, Justin, is what you're looking for. Is what you're looking at relevant to what we're...
Yes, I'm looking in 1 Kings to see if power or knowledge.
Well, Solomon said he wanted wisdom, but he already had power, right? All right, everything else, I'll take that. Now, let's think about this. When you're assigned career clusters, what are they telling you? What is the purpose of you being here at school when you're assigned a career cluster? How many of you plan on going to college? Okay, good. All right, all the hands are up. Why are you going to college? Honesty. All right, honesty. When we think about this, when people think of going to college, most of you are thinking in terms of preparing for a job, right? That you want to get the job you want. Now, everybody's got their story about some person who dropped out of high school or never went to college or didn't graduate college and became some really rich person or something like that. There's a student that I used to teach that I think he might have gone back and got his GED, but he makes more money than I do, and he's working on electricity and all that kind of stuff. So he's doing something dangerous, but he's making more money than me. But generally, in the aggregate, people who graduate college make more money than people who don't. People who graduate high school make more money than people who don't. People who have a 2-year degree make more money, generally, than people who don't. So when we're thinking about this, the point of education is to get a good job. All right? Now, how many of y'all would say that's primarily the objective of your education? The primary objective. Okay, we got some people say that's the primary objective. Now, what would be another objective of being educated?
So you won't make stupid decisions.
Okay, so don't make stupid decisions. To be a good person, right? You want to become a good person. You want to be cultivated and civilized. Okay, that's something you would think that we don't. So we don't want to make stupid decisions. I would certainly think that in general, like informed voters make better voting decisions than uninformed voters who don't know what's going on and that sort of thing. So you could see where we have knowledge and power implications when it comes to education, right? And the thing is, though, that I think, how many of you would say that primarily you would think about, I'm going to college because I want to be a better person. I want to continue my education. Is there anybody that would say that that would be your primary objective of going to college? Okay, there are some of you who would say that. Now, the other thing is that when your parents or people who are older, your grandparents, anybody who is an adult figure in your life, when's the last time you ever heard somebody say, you know what? Gosh, I wish I hadn't gotten so educated. Like, I don't know why when those teachers assigned books to read, I read them all. Why did I do that? And I paid too much attention in class when my teachers were teaching, and I learned too much. When's the last time you heard an adult say that? I wish I hadn't gotten so darn educated. Really?
Oh, because she wanted to get like a higher degree or whatever. She said that she
Wishes she wouldn't have gotten that particular degree?
because of like she had to miss a lot of stuff so she could go to
Okay, so she missed some things like in her kids' lives and that sort of thing, perhaps, because she was busy on that degree. Now, but she didn't say, I wish I had paid less attention in high school and college. I wish I hadn't learned so much, right? Now, my dad told me, I have a dad, all right? My dad told me when I was in high school. My dad is a physician, so he is educated. He's got a terminal degree. He makes good money. But he told me when I was in high school, and that may have, now he told me I didn't want to be a teacher. I said sometime when I was in high school, it'd be kind of fun, I think, to be a history teacher or something like that. My dad said, you don't want to be a teacher. And he told me at some point, though, he said, I want you to get a classical education. Now, when we think about the classical model of education, you're getting educated for the sake of being an educated person, engaging in humanistic studies. My dad felt like when he was going through school, he got what he needed to become a doctor. But a lot of these guys in his profession also had read books, knew how to talk about things. And my dad would find himself in situations where he didn't feel like he was able to participate in some of these conversations with people who had had more of a humanistic education. So my dad said that I want you, my goal for you. Now, of course, he wanted me to get a good job and make money, and teaching is a much better job pay-wise than a lot of people think. But he said that he wanted his kids to be educated people. And so that's another objective there, that really a lot of you, how many of you would say that these are both valuable objectives? Not weighing one against the other, but they're both valuable objectives to getting educated. But you can see how there are two schools of thought here, and there's sometimes some tension between the two, because sometimes people don't want to take one of my AP history classes because they say, well, I've got to do this in science because that has to do with what I want to do when I grow up. That people are thinking not about educating themselves now, but about getting educated for whatever job they have to do. So we have two different things here. So we are looking for knowledge, but we are also looking for power. And you have to make that value judgment. And a lot of the reason why we look at philosophy is so that we can make these value judgments.